Today we are going over the top 5 Florida stories you have to see to believe. Sit back, grab a snack and hit the subscribe button. Roll the intro. Five. The Great Florida Snake Massacre. In 2006, a bizarre incident unfolded in the small town of Fort Lauderdale that would forever be known as the Great Florida Snake Massacre. Local resident Richard L. was tired of an increasing population of Burmese pythons lurking in the swamps near his home. Frustrated by the local wildlife's persistent encroachment into his property, he devised a plan that would have most animal rights advocates up in arms. He gathered his friends for a snake hunting expedition, armed not with hunting rifles or traps but with baseball bats, shovels, and sheer determination. Over a weekend, the group embarked on their mission, eager to rid the area of these giant constrictors. Ramping up the chaos, their escapade escalated as they shared videos of their brutal snake kills online. They became infamous amongst the local community, attracting both admirers and critics. However, what started as a weekend of reckless fun took a dark turn when authorities caught wind of their activities. Richard and his gang were charged with animal cruelty after a video surfaced, showing them brutally attacking several defenseless snakes. Local law enforcement scrambled to put a cap on what many began to call infamous snake hunters. In a twist of fate, the incident highlighted the wider issue of invasive species in Florida. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission used the publicity from the massacre to raise awareness about the ecological impact of non-native snakes like the Burmese python. Ultimately, while the massacre turned out to be a foolish venture for Richard and his friends, it sparked a necessary conversation about wildlife management in the state and the need for more responsible approaches to dealing with invasive species. 4. The naked man on drugs who tried to steal a zookeeper's car. In 2016, a surreal incident unfolded at the Naples Zoo when a man stripped down and attempted to steal a zookeeper's car. The individual, later identified as 23-year-old Jacob W., was under the influence of a potent mix of drugs and had somehow made his way into the zoo's premises. Dressed only in his birthday suit, Jacob decided that he needed to make a quick escape in one of the zoo's vehicles. The zookeeper, oblivious to the impending chaos, had just finished a routine day when Jacob jumped into his car with wild fervor. What ensued was a mixture of disbelief and hilarity, as Jacob floored the gas pedal, trying to navigate his way out of the zoo. The zookeeper quickly called, while security personnel chased after the erratic driver. The scene quickly turned comical, with officers and zoo staff darting after the speeding and exposed car. Jacob's wild joyride didn't last long. He crashed into a barrier and promptly exited the vehicle, deciding that running was a better option than driving. Authorities apprehended Jacob a short distance away. Ironically, it was his panicked sprint that led to his capture, as the authorities had already reached the car and were waiting for him to appear. The incident sparked laughter and disbelief across Florida, but it also served as a cautionary tale about drug abuse and its bizarre consequences. The Naples Zoo remained relatively unscathed, and even added Jacob to their list of unusual animal encounters that had taken place on their grounds. 3. The Florida man who drove a miniature tank. In a true display of Florida man antics, a local resident in Ocala decided to take his newfound hobby to an extreme. In 2014, Richard A., having converted a miniature military tank into a functional street vehicle, took to the streets to drive around town. Covered in camouflage paint and complete with a fake turret, this small tank drew attention and curiosity wherever it went. Richard's decision to roll through city traffic felt like a scene straight out of an action movie, yet the atmosphere was quite the opposite when locals realized the absurdity of what was happening. Richard's joyride didn't go unnoticed by law enforcement, who quickly began receiving calls from baffled residents regarding the unidentified tank wandering the streets. Unfazed by their concerned citizens, Richard continued on his way, treating the whole experience as a fun lark. However, it soon became clear that his heavy-duty hobby had legality issues, particularly regarding vehicle registration and road safety laws. Police officers finally caught up to him, and the situation could have escalated into a humorous chase, but Richard voluntarily pulled over, fully realizing the potential absurdity of the ordeal. After an initial investigation, Richard faced charges related to driving an unregistered vehicle and operating something considered unsafe for public road use. He became a local celebrity, attracting various media outlets willing to interview him. While Richard's tank driving days were over, his unusual enthusiasm for military replicas sparked conversations about the lengths Floridians would go for quirky DIY projects, reminding everyone that in Florida, reality often feels stranger than fiction. 2. The 10,000-pound alligator farm showdown. In 2018, a colossal showdown between a local alligator farm and a nearby neighborhood unfolded in the small town of Okeechobee. The farm, which boasted nearly 50 alligators weighing around 10,000 pounds collectively, had been a staple of the community for years. However, as the alligators grew larger, residents began expressing concern about their safety, especially when one particularly adventurous alligator decided to break free from its enclosure and take a casual stroll down a nearby neighborhood street. The incident began when that large alligator, affectionately called Big Jim, made a surprise appearance during rush hour, prompting frantic calls to local authorities. As news spread, residents gathered with phones at the ready, documenting the unusual sightseeing experience. Wildlife officers worked quickly to contain Big Jim, but not before the gator caused bedlam, weaving his way through lawns and converting the quiet neighborhood into a live animal reality show. Neighbors watched, half in horror and half in fascination, as the situation unfolded in their front yards. For several hours, the standoff between Big Jim and local authorities was a defining moment in Okeechobee's history. Eventually, a team of skilled wildlife experts successfully sedated and safely relocated him back to the farm. The incident grossed a significant amount of media attention, ultimately leading to discussions about the necessity of alligator farming regulations in Florida. What could have turned disastrous ended in the form of a happy reunion for Big Jim and his fellow alligators, while the townsfolk were left with a wild story that would be told for generations. 1. The Florida man who tried to rob a store dressed as Spider-Man. One of the wildest true stories to emerge from Florida involved the infamous Spider-Man robbery in 2009. A man known simply as Sean, who had a curious affinity for the web-slinging superhero, decided to put on a full Spider-Man costume and hold up a local convenience store. The plot was bizarre from the start, perhaps motivated by a misguided sense of heroism or a desire for social media fame. Sean walked into the store, armed with nothing but his comic costume and an empty plastic toy gun. Eyewitness accounts depict a scene that oscillated between terrifying and absurd. Dressed head to toe in bright red and blue spandex, Sean yelled at the cashier to hand over the money, while striking awkward poses in an apparent attempt to channel his inner superhero. As customers attempted to process what was unfolding, Sean's exaggerated movements drew laughter from several onlookers. Undeterred, he insisted that he meant business, waving the toy gun around as if it were a real weapon. Local law enforcement had little trouble apprehending Sean shortly after he fled the scene with a meager haul of cash, as the sheer ridiculousness of his disguise made him easily identifiable. Interestingly, Sean claimed in court that he only wanted to make the situation amusing, arguing that superheroes often fix problems rather than create them. Nevertheless, he was charged with armed robbery and faced serious repercussions. This offbeat incident became a legendary Florida tale, encapsulating the spirit of craziness that often defines the antics of its residents and igniting conversations about the lengths some will go for attention.